Alright, so we're going to do a more fun video um, discussing a topic that's very widespread, higher gaming difficulty. So there's a growing a, a market that has boomed and stuff for people that are into more difficult games. Um, Games where looking back for even a second and stuff will cost you the whole game. Games for even a second of distraction, a fraction of a second of a distraction can cost you the whole game. Um, Games that have a very broad range of difficulty. Um, these games require elite level either physical or mental traits or relatively elite level. So, um, these are like your 4X games and games like that. Um, you know, your Contra hardcore games, uh, games like that. Um, those games like that are real sweat boxes. Um, and people gravitate to these games a lot, especially in the United States, because they can still be fun. You know, um, they let you go back in and try again, and yeah, they have a nice gameplay loop to them still. You know, so yeah. Now, for my credibility here, I've been gaming since I was 3 years old. My mom started me out on one of the hardest games ever made, which was The Lion King for the Sega Genesis Gen 2. I can show you what that looks like. Ah, this is what I had and stuff. The first controller port was broken, and so we used the second one. We used this type of controller right here where my mouse is. Um, so I used to play Sonic Spinball, which is a very hard game, but I got comfortable with it, and I know I got pretty far in it. I don't think I'm not sure whether I beat it or not. Stuff, but eh, it's a fair chance that I beat it. Um, I also played Batman Forever here and there, once or twice. Played Mortal Kombat 4 occasionally, but that terrified me. I'm 34 now, and I mostly play tougher video games, but I enjoy leisurely games too. So, difficulties are part of the user experience. So, um, this video is going to be about how to beat these games, what you need to know about these games and stuff, so you don't have any misinformation about them. Um, so the difficulties in game user experience design are part of the user experience design. Um, there's little to no political machinery or casino mechanisms in there, which is nice, but disability access often lags behind for pragmatic reasons, also sometimes for just malicious reasons. Um, Gamers with psychological or physical abilities don't necessarily get lawful address in these games. Inclusivity is not, but ought to be always part of the user experience design of the game. Um, it's only to the benefit of a game that it invites in all sorts of people to play and stuff. Granted that the community that they don't that the community accepts them and stuff, because games, they form fan bases. They like things a certain way and stuff, and um, it is not okay when pe- when um when developers try to cater to a new player base because they're just alienating people. That's wrong. So, um, so yes, genre influences difficulty a lot. Some genres have a higher floor difficulty, leading to more virtual understanding than working on things. Virtual understanding can be with respect to people or logical structures that sometimes change. So while you're gaming and stuff, there's the stuff you see, and there's a lot of stuff in the background going on with the programming and what gets stored in memory and what gets loaded, and what. And then there's also the aspect of, okay, you did this and stuff, so that can trigger something, or and there's dynamic events that get triggered, hidden events and stuff. Plenty of games have all sorts of things like that. So you have to understand like what kind of code of conduct and thinking you're following while you're playing. Like, you know, you, you walk an inch in the grid of that game or whatever, or to a new room and stuff. You have to think about, what you did or didn't do and stuff, and how that reacts and stuff. There's always hidden mechanics with the choices you do from the button presses and stuff. Um, yeah, but games certainly get a lot of information about what you're doing. Um, and a good example of this is the Psycho Mantis fight and the original Psycho Mantis fight in Metal Gear Solid. Um, you know, that game knew what you were doing with your controller and memory card. Crazy, right? So, and yeah, so yeah, some games have a director or adaptive AI and stuff. Like for example, Alien Isolation has a director AI that actually tells the alien how to menace you more aggressively or less aggressively, or more fairly or more fairly or more unfairly based on what you're doing and stuff. Um, so but yeah, sometimes you just need to know IT or programming to do well in these games, such as with glitch speedruns. But programming can be static or dynamic in the sense that the cyber logic, meaning you know, the implied programming and stuff, as not just a mental construction, but as an actual cyber construction in the game, will change periodically and stuff. Um, for example, with the quarter machine system. In the quarter machine system, a lot of things go in the back end and stuff to get you in a rewarding gameplay loop, and then it punishes you and stuff. So you have like a moment of like this dopamine withdrawal or whatever, and then you want to put in more quarters in the machine. This is that's something that started in the 80s, and they that has been used to get people into a game and stuff. They make you occupy the game more and stuff, so you can be somebody's teammates or whatever and stuff. But there a lot of things are being done with the data and stuff that are sometimes dubious. So yeah, as you can imagine, the quarter machine system is a dubious business practice and it is illegal. Um, there are plenty of law books that will back me up on that. Some other systems are the Asian system. I noticed with the games from South Korea, China, Japan, and such, they the East Asian system, I should call it. They tend to have some divergence between the uh, what what you normally expect and what actually happens and stuff, and lots of interruptions and stuff. There's no real gameplay loop and stuff, except the job that you're forced to do. Um, it's definitely more and that creates that forces different strategies and stuff. Like you really start to think in terms of shorties, um, and yeah, but they're more visually dominant and stuff. You don't necessarily um, follow the language of the game, um, and the language is often not in constructive or explicit terms. Then you have the child system and stuff. These are difficulties meant for children and stuff. Like you're playing Epic Mickey or Spyro the Dragon and stuff. It's a nice simple game. It's a leisurely game. It's much like the leisure system over here. But the leisure system can appeal to different age ranges and stuff. Then you have the movie system. It's very set PC. Like for example, with the older games that were used to promote movies, like Peter Jackson's King Kong. I can show that. I mean, no, I won't show that to you. But with Peter Jackson's King Kong, the video game and stuff, it's very set PC and stuff. Like you're kind of like a spark for a powder keg for a lot of events and stuff. Then you have the sandbox system. You kind of define the game. What you do in the extreme end, you have Gary's Mod, and the less extreme end, you have like some crappy Grand Theft Auto games. I think Grand Theft Auto games are just overly insulting and negative and stuff. They're not always very funny. Um, you have to be a little bit crazy to be a part of the experience in that game. Then you have the Twitch system and stuff. These games are just very twitchy. That's like your Unreal Tournament 2004. I have some good Twitch games right here. Um, yeah, Unreal Tournament 2004. That's very twitchy. Then you have Unreal Tournament 3, and then you have you know Quake Champions, Quake Live, Quake 2 RTX. These games are just all about reacting quickly and stuff, and you confirm target, react, and then you move basically a lot. Um, it's you always it's actually a little bit crazy. Then you have the skill-based system and stuff. Like you need to you make a skill within the game, a very basic skill working with things. Um, or sometimes people and stuff if the game involves a lot of buying and trading and stuff. Then you have the intelligent gaming system and stuff. These are games that are very G-loaded, meaning they use your general intelligence, higher brain functions more. That's like you know what's called civilization games, stuff like that. These games require critical thinking. You're using your mental imagery and logic and stuff to solve problems. Um, and then you have the marketing funnel system. These games are just there to get money out of you and stuff. So now the ones that are um, successful aren't purely marketing funnels, but it's very obvious that they are. Like for example, is like Candy Crush. Candy Crush, like they get people hooked on buying the microtransactions, um, or you have you know the things in the neighborhood of the V-Bucks and Fortnite and stuff, all the things that lead up to that and stuff. It's like, oh, you're not good enough at this game? Here, buy these V-Bucks and you'll get um, better gear. We'll quote unquote promote you in the game. Um, which is part of the pay-to-win system. Um, these are in the same neighborhood actually. Uh, yeah, these are in the same neighborhood. Um, oh, so then you have uh, the drag and process addiction aspect. Um, like all these systems, by the way, are subsystems. So the drag and process addiction aspect subsystem is that the game just is just there to purely annoy and insult you into um, being hooked to it and stuff. Like there's like an Overton window shift there that happens. The game is terrorizing you, scaring you, grossing you out and stuff. But you get a break from that, and that creates the gameplay loop. Um, those games are actually not meant to be like you can't be an affectable person and play them and stuff. That's for people with very very thick skin, um, and very resilient people. Um, but if you're not any amount of thick-skinned or resilient, that's not good. And you need to have a lot of thick skin and resilience to do well in life in general. So the more the merrier. Hey. Then you have fair play systems. These easily the best ones. A good example of this is, you know, yeah, a game like this. You design your own board games and stuff, so you can make it as fair as you want. Then you have, chess stuff like, chess ultra, um, pure chess. It's chess. You're playing chess, so there's that. Chess is a nice, fair, and balanced game, but white moves first, which it always gives it a tempo advantage. White's always can always be ahead to checkmate. Black has to force a disruption to create white to blunder, or white um, or just maximally compel it and stuff, which is kind of forcing the issue and stuff, which is works. But anyway, we're not going to talk about chess right now, the chess theory. Um, then we have the uh, the amusement or play system. This is another um, top quality. This is a top quality system. Um, these systems are just games like this are just meant to make you laugh or have fun and stuff. What's a good example of that? Psychonauts and Psychonauts 2. These games aren't purely difficult. They're just there to amuse you. Um, then you have like fun and amusing. It was like yes, comedy night and stuff. It's just there to make you laugh. Derp Souls, um, Electric Highways, High on Life. This game isn't difficult. It's a very set PC fun game. Um, then you have politically influenced systems. You have to know about what's lawful, focused, and gainful conduct in these games. You can't forget things in these games. If you forget details in the game, your behavior is not going to be focused and stuff. You have nothing to, you're not building on anything and stuff. Um, and it also sometimes comes down to a choice of philosophy. These games get very subjective in that respect. These are pretty dubious systems and stuff. Like, games like this just want you to think a certain way, um, and the people who make them don't are malicious actors and stuff. They can be these games like this can be considered a type of malware, in a sense. They're a variation of malware. Um, but these game, uh, but when these games don't build on your understanding, then yeah. Um, like in these games, basically you learn to respect the matter of like what that person's trying to do and what's going on, and you work with it, you adapt and stuff. You understand this person's trying to go for this and stuff. That's not yours. That's not your, or that's your business and stuff. And there's gonna be some contest there. You have to broker a deal somehow, um, or you have to fight it out and win. Um, hey, that's just how it is. You see that happen sometimes in the Fallout games too. So Fallout can be considered a political game. Um, Fallout 4 is pretty political. Uh, New Vegas, oh, Fallout Tactics. I haven't played too much of that. Yeah. Then, so with all these systems, this is not all the systems. So, dominating the game versus purely solving it. So, games can be dominated because they have, there's tricks and parlor tricks you can use to get around difficulty and stuff. Those are good time saves and stuff. And games are using your real time. So, yeah, dominating games is perfectly fine and acceptable. There's nothing, it's not like you're cheating and stuff. It's not a cheat. You're just not meeting expectations. And that's fine. But some games use statistics to track that too. For example, like Dark Souls 3, like there's so many cheeses to beat those bosses, and cheesing, yeah, that can uh, cheesing is a way of dominating the game. Um, but when you purely solve the game, you're thinking about what the game is virtually trying you to do and stuff, and then you work in that system and stuff. You actually get more in the end out of purely solving the game and stuff. That's a very stimulating and stuff. So dominating the game involves discovering trick metagames that let you get around difficulty. There's always some factoring out. Okay, cover that. This is all stuff I wrote before making this video. Then you have purely solving is often less efficient, but is the intended way to win for winnable games. These games do not use the quarter machine designs and such scam elements to it. But yes, some games are scams, such as pay-to-win games, or games that allow a player to access higher performance for investing more money into the game. Um, those, illegitimate. Now, what does it take to beat harder games? Some incredibly hard games are like Contra Hardcore, which is extremely long solution. They're not really meant to be beatable. They mostly test pressure, but if you could beat them, then you have something extra, something special. So you have to develop systems, formulas, and recipes to beat games of any genre, of any difficulty. This is how you get maximal domination in the game at the lowest cost to performance. Yeah, yeah, there you go. Performance here is a performance of the material. You need to have sufficient material. Character. So you need to have a certain level of character as a person to beat these games. You want to be like more like cerebral or thoracic and muscular, minorly osseous, least most alimentive. And so alimentives and stuff will have the most discomfort with exerting themselves. They run opposite to the brain. Um, so yeah, if you do any heavy eating or heavy sitting around and stuff, you want to stop that. Um, you need to work on you need to have good cardio. Um, Aerobics stuff, like your lungs need to work really well. You clean them out, you practice breathing exercises, you exercise your diaphragm and stuff. You have good oxygen flow in the room. um, you need to exercise your brain a lot. You study, you work hard and stuff. You develop a strong mind. You develop your cerebral muscles, like your finger muscles, your hand muscles, your forearms, toes, tongue, and eyes. All those fine motor muscles, hands, lips. You create muscle separation and stuff. Then you have you, you need to have good senses, your eyes and ears mainly. Games mainly use your eyes and your ears. Then secondarily, you have then you have your supporting muscles. That need to be strong. Your hamstrings, neck, spine, upper back muscles, muscles that bring in your wrists when your shoulders are back. Um, you know, they're somewhere in your chest. You know, those have to be right and stuff. I would never, ever tell anybody to game at the detriment of their health and stuff. That can be so dangerous and stuff. There's people that have gamed for as little as 4 days straight that have died and stuff. This is not a joke. Gaming is not safe. Okay, you have to but you have to manage the risk and stuff, as with all risks. Um, you need good manner of energy to beat the harder games. Neurotropics are great for games, but you need some pre-workout to activate the body a lot too, so it has brain has a better support system. You need to eat. You need to eat in a way that medically works best for you. Um, you need to eat for your blood type, your genetics, your ethnocultural group, and their health liabilities that come in and stuff. You need to eat with your doctors and healthcare um, workers' recommendations. Um, I have a video on how to get your healthcare straight if you don't practically have time to see a doctor or anything, um, for one reason or another. Um, you have supporting equipment. Yeah, supporting equipment helps, like a standing chair, like a chair that doesn't require you to be sedentary. A cervical collar holds up your head. A wrist straightener. You can have massage equipment for breaks, or massage equipment that works while you're sitting to encourage good blood flow. Soft cushioning for blood flow. Even if you're very muscular and tough and stuff, you can still compress your blood vessels and stuff. And your muscles are probably already doing that if you're very overly muscular and stuff. You got to be careful not to squeeze your cells. Your cells do not like Human cells do not like to be squeezed and stuff. Because think about that. Think about a cell and stuff. Like most cells, it's a human cell. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Think of this human cell. Like you have this, it has all these dozens of systems that are supposed to run and stuff. Look at this. This is hundreds of things that need to work correctly and stuff. If you squeeze that, where do you think all that stuff's going to go and stuff? How do you think that's going to go? It's going to create cellular turbulence and stuff. You don't want that. You don't want that and stuff. Um, there's some degree of flexibility with cellular turbulence, like cells can have injections go into them and stuff like that. That's different. Okay, you really don't want to compress cells. They die like that. You compress bone tissue too much, it dies. You compress muscle, it dies. Yeah, brain swelling, it kills brain cells. Be careful about having hard cushions and stuff. I know a lot of y'all muscular types, you love to have a harder cushion and stuff because you don't like falling asleep, but you gotta keep yourself working in your chair, man. Um, Okay. Yeah, always have a healthcare team and stuff. Somebody can call, go to your doctor's appointments and stuff. Again, gaming can lead to serious illnesses, even injuries. When if you're getting declining performance, it means you're burning the candle both ends. You are meter burning, boy, girl, whatever gender. You need better healthcare, not a better gaming technique, strategy tip, etc. Mental plan. Yeah, to beat these, you need to know what you're doing and stuff. You don't you need an idea of what you need to do and how to do it, like because you need to create a system. Um, you calculate variations, you make sure it works backwards. And like the key thing to solving is like you're working backwards from the win condition. That should be a good picture in your head. Um, and then you work backwards from that, and so then you address the chaotic stuff by working backwards and forwards and seeing the liabilities and stuff. Um, and that solves the position from the opening to the start. Um, they have the experience trials and stuff. This basically is a huge factor on how quickly you learn the game and get good at it and stuff. You have the experimental rep, you try out different stuff. Um, because every game it should be assumed to have its own specific workings. Then you have the data gathering rep. Um, you're just getting information there. Um, so you get a sense of what type of game is, how to categorize it in your head and stuff like that. And you have the touring rep. You get to learn about the visual features and what those can refer to and entail. They have the combo testing rep where you test like tactical combinations of ideas of things to do, and you construct logic and see if it's applicable or or whether it guides understanding and stuff. Um, yeah, yeah. Like some kind of line of philosophical thinking or something like that. I have a lot of lines of philosophical thinking, if you haven't noticed. That's as a person who kind of shifts between verbal thinking to mathematical thinking to visual thinking and stuff. Like I do that a lot. Um, so then you have your strategy rep and stuff where you figure out like the big picture kind of stuff, and the the most important bottom line things that need to be done um, in order to win, get the best case, get the best Nash equilibrium. Um, they have the variations rep and stuff where you see what your essential variations of the game that you can be forced on you and stuff. Um, so your forcible and forced variations, um, most compellable and most compelled variations. Those you want to these two bullets you want to prioritize the most. Then you have the mental simulation building rep. Basically, you're like building your idea of like what to do in the game, and you're trying to purify your memory of what to do and stuff. You don't want to like you don't want to learn the bad ideas. You're wasting your time with it. Then this is why I get mad at chess sometimes, because they're like, oh, if you're 1300, you should play this and blah blah blah. Like it's ridiculous. It's like so brainwashy and stuff. Then you have the relations rep. Um, you build your economic calculations. Like okay, you do this and it yields this and stuff, and it costs this. Cost yield processes and stuff, and then you have positional calculations like okay, you do this and then you get X amount of points for this and this statistical category. Then you do this which is contingent on essential variations. Then you have your piece performance and stuff. Um, you know you determine what are the aspects that make the pieces work well. Like what maximizes your gun damage per bullet at optimal rate of fire. That type of stuff. Um, there you go. And then you have the spatially dependent relations and stuff. Um, like you know, basically the equations that come up based off of where you are in space. Up, down, back, here, there, and stuff. Does the game have 4D travel and stuff? Go. Some games have that too. 5D travel, 4D travel. Then you have quickness of mind. You need that too to beat these games. Most games just need you to think quick. You don't need to know a lot or use advanced philosophical reasoning, use math, or have a lot of mental construction going on. This is why you don't really game that much and why gaming can be a drag. You need to be careful with the drag and process addition aspect of it. And your system for this should be not to underestimate these games and how fast they can get or where the pace can change and stuff, because games can get you like that too, especially in the East Asian systems and some German systems too. Oh, what these German gamers do is just too sharp. It's almost as if they make bots to do this. Or at least it's how it was 11 years ago. Then you have you study and research the game. You form dynamic formulas and recipes. You know, um, like, so everything you come up with your experience trials and everything that might swap out and stuff, and then you might find out that you're an actually pretty intelligent game. Uh, and yeah, like Sins of a Solar Empire. There's a lot of different subjects going on there, so there's lots of systems that get swapped out and stuff. Because um, a game for kind of building that and stuff, you could play XCOM EU. This is like one of the best, most gold standard games. Games like this have lots of different systems that get swapped out and stuff. It's not all about duking it out in the ground and stuff, because that that has a tempo burn to it. That you burn through material with that too, resources. To beat these games, you should be having fun and stuff. I'm not gonna tell you something like, as a teacher. I'm not gonna tell you something that's gonna wreck your psyche and stuff. So you should be having their games. Have fun with them. Like, they're not work. Games are not supposed to substitute your job. Like, some of us have loved ones that we look after. We raise children. We have a brother, a sister, a mother, whatever, best friend. Like, don't replace them with the freaking games. Like, then you have tilt prevention. You have you bring yourself to energy. You minimize your allostatic load. Part of that means getting good sleep, eating, and drinking. That can fix a lot of stuff sometimes. You know, your food be thy medicine, and let your medicine be thy food. Hippocrates. I think Hippocrates said that. Though I could be wrong. Let me see. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. Okay, that's okay. Okay, oopsie. So I'll just amend that. But however, if it's somebody else's food, don't take it and stuff. Propriety in all things, always. Okay, I'm not going to tell you to do something that's not lawful, even if it's in the common law domain and stuff. You take somebody's food, you ought to compensate them for it. At compliment. Okay? Don't say you weren't told about that. Because it can happen by accident, or by compulsion and stuff, by force and stuff. Sometimes you're forgiven and stuff. That's fine. Eventually, you can go back and compensate them. That's perfectly fine too. People don't hate that. Um, so fix. Yeah. So to prevent tilt, you want to fix the other areas of your life first, even if it means being alone. Not everyone enjoys a social life because most people suck, and life will teach you why. I promise you. I promise you. Treating the game as an experience because a substituted experience is part of the gameplay and fun. Challenge runners don't necessarily need fun. They need to be super awake and focused, even aggressive. So know that. Mastering the system. The system was written in constructive language, so assuming otherwise is a loss of debate. Do not blunder your like. Do not do the thing and stuff. Like, you might say, okay, that's your opinion. That's because that's respective to my process. My opinion's still grounded, okay, and stuff. My intent here is to teach for the better of U.S. residents, okay? And yeah, that wraps up this lesson. You know a little bit about higher gaming difficulties, and